What's going on? It is that time once again, talking Tennessee right here on the Ultimate Tennessee Podcast, live with you on 104.5 The Zone TV from our home studios on Facebook Live, Twitter, Twitch, and 104.5 The Zone on YouTube. You can see the boys right here. I'm Will Bowling. That's Lucas Panzica. We got Volquest's Ben McKee hanging out with us tonight. Going to talk some fall camp, some Tennessee defensive backs, and of course, it can't be a UT show without hitting some sort of quarterback storylines as well. Ben, good to see you, my brother. How are you?
Good to see you, my friends. I'm doing well, trying to survive camp. I know y'all are doing the same there with Titans camp, watching the best fullback in the entire NFL get to work and paving the way for Derrick Henry. But I'm doing well. Hope you all are as well.
So, Lucas, I haven't told you this before, but you and I obviously are starting, you know this part, starting high school football coverage on the Zone tomorrow night. Shameless plug. We've got our high school football media day tomorrow. And then Lucas and I will start broadcasting the high school football game of the week on the Zone next Friday. Ben is a former color commentator along with me for Alcoa Football and Diamond Clear Media in Knoxville. Ben, do you have any advice for Lucas about working with me on a football broadcast?
Not really. I mean, I just feel happy for you because you don't have to deal with me. You get to deal with Lucas, a true professional and not a scrub like me. I'm the one that's hard to deal with, not Will. Will's very meticulous and very hardworking. So Will makes it easy on everybody that he works with. So
that was nice. I was expecting like he's gonna bite your head off or well, Ben was doing the camera and color at the same time.
Oh man,
days. It was
double duty, kind of like you're doing right now, trying to move into a house while simultaneously covering fall camp less than a month removed from kickoff. You're a bold man, Ben McKee.
Yes, and not just move into a new house, but paint for my lovely wife and also put in new flooring. So between all that and fall camp, it's been quite the week. It feels like fall camp's been going on for a month, and in reality, we're only 2 days in the pad. So
that's always
the
good.
rest of the month is going to be interesting.
That's how I feel covering Titans camp too. And as you know, Ben, you kind of get into the dog days of camp now where the first couple of days, everybody wants to see the videos. They want to hear all the quotes. They want to see, especially with a new coach, how practice is run and hear the comparisons. And then it's after like 3 or 4 days. People are like, all right, yeah, I don't care. But when does the real football start? Like, wait a minute. You were loving this like not even 2 days ago. What happened?
Yes, that's exactly right. And apparently Joe Milton is Cam Newton and Velus Jones and Jalen Hyatt are Julio Jones and A.J. Brown out there running around. Jabari Small is Derrick Henry, and Tyon Evans is Darren Sproles. So
D. Beckwith could actually be Derrick Henry.
He could if D. Beckwith wanted to dress like Derrick Henry for Halloween. I think he would legitimately be stopped multiple times walking down the strip for some autographs.
I love it. All right, well, you're a busy man, so let's get right into it, Ben. Let's start with the big storyline today. Brian Maurer not at Tennessee's practice. What can you tell us about the Brian Maurer situation, his status with the team, and what do you know about what's going on with him right now?
I know that Brian Maurer was not at practice this morning, which is somewhat of a surprise. Obviously, the internet, Vol Twitter, Tennessee social media started to buzz last night when he posted yet another cryptic social media post saying something along the lines of, they took my dream away from me after 4 days and hashtag 18 out. So that was another typical Brian Maurer social media post. And you still assume that he would be at practice the next morning because, as you can tell by my tone, I mean, this wasn't the first time something like this has happened with Brian Maurer. But he didn't show up to practice this morning. And I would be very surprised if Brian Maurer is on the team going into the weekend, going into next week. He is not officially, at least within the last hour or so. I'm not aware of him entering the portal as of yet, but I do believe that is the expectation. Josh Heupel will meet with the media tomorrow morning, and I'm sure he'll give an update then as to the status of Brian Maurer anybody, all roster moves. So I would be very surprised if Brian Maurer continues to be on the football team going forward.
Well, and I hate this because it's a win for fans reading into cryptic social media posts. Like, how many times does a player post a song lyric and fans are immediately like, oh my gosh, are you quitting? Or are you mad at someone on your team? Like, and when in reality, they probably just got in a fight with their girlfriend or something. That's what I hate about this, because this is all about us, and we are selfish people. I kid, of course, but I am actually upset that fans were like, oh my gosh, maybe he's leaving the team, and could have actually been right based on one Instagram post, when these are 20-year-olds that are fickle human beings at best.
The greatest example of this was Jonathan Kongbo posting that picture of cleats saying, I'm hanging it up for now, something along those lines. As Jonathan Kongbo retires from football, he was literally talking about the FIFA video game in like 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. So, yes, we're here playing this game again.
Yes, so he says. And, I mean, Brian Maurer's the perfect example of the cryptic social media posts. And
yeah,
I don't want to harp on Brian Maurer too much.
Right.
He is somebody who has come out and voiced his struggles, battles with mental health. So obviously, first and foremost, you want to make sure that Brian Maurer is A-okay. And then you can kind of read into the social media posts. I mean, I hate to flat out be brutally honest, but I mean, this is he's more known for his social media than he is playing on the football field.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because he has a great skill set. I don't think he has the best skill set in Tennessee's quarterback room, but in terms of being able to use his legs, and he has a lot of natural arm talent. I mean, he has one of the better skill sets in the quarterback room. It's just he hasn't been able to piece it together between the ears from a football standpoint, and also show the maturity of how to handle his business throughout the facility and away from the facility throughout the course of the week when it's just not time to play football. So it's really unfortunate for Brian Maurer. We had somebody call in on the Swain event this morning, and I thought put it perfectly that 35-year-old, 40-year-old Brian Maurer is going to look back on this and really regret maybe how he's handled some of his time at Tennessee, because he had a golden opportunity to be a starter at Tennessee, to be a starter in the SEC, and he didn't really handle his business. So obviously, first and foremost, you hope he's okay mentally, because he has come out and spoke about his struggles mentally. And then second of all, you do hope he finds a home and finds somewhere where he can contribute on the football field.
And not a huge shock, right? If this quarterback room gets whittled down and Brian Maurer not a part of it, despite his last connection with Josh Heupel, almost committing to UCF over Tennessee back during his recruiting days, where ironically he said earlier this week, right, that one of the reasons he didn't commit to UCF was because he didn't think Heupel would be around there very long, but he thought Jeremy Pruitt would be at Tennessee for a very long time. So it's funny how these things shake out sometimes in college football. But shifting gears a little bit to this quarterback room now, obviously Brian Maurer is still not, on the roster, right? He's not in the transfer portal that we know of yet. We just know social media posts. He wasn't at practice today. Maybe there's writing on the wall, but let's look at the quarterback room for now as it sits. Let's say it is Hooker, Bailey, Milton. Is everything now just pointing to Joe Milton being the starter September 2nd against Bowling Green, or is that at least the direction this staff is trying to point this to?
I don't think it's that cut and dry. I mean, I do think there's a reason that Joe Milton was brought in during the spring after the staff had a month or so to evaluate the room. And, Joe Milton wasn't announced publicly until the end of spring practice, but he had been committed to Tennessee for several weeks leading up to the announcement and throughout spring practice. And as I've alluded to with you guys when I've been on before, when y'all have been gracious enough to have me, is that Joe Milton isn't as far behind in the playbook as you would expect because he missed spring practice. Obviously, people will think that, oh, well, he's going to be behind in the playbook, and that's not the case. Tennessee had things set up where they were, making sure that he was getting caught up to speed in like a classroom type of setting. So I do think that ideally Joe Milton will come in and be the guy. Obviously, a big fan of his skill set is the coaching staff. They did recruit him out of high school as well, and he has all the natural ability in the world. Can throw it 80 yards in the air, just unreal arm strength. He can be accurate with the football. I know if you go watch some game tape from Michigan, it kind of looks like he's inaccurate with the football. But I think that's more of the mind tying him up and not being crystal clear on Jim Harbaugh's system there at Michigan. And we'll see if he can straighten that out here at Tennessee. But right now, I'm not holding that against him because Jim Harbaugh has proven that he's just going to ruin any quarterback that goes up there to Ann Arbor. So I encourage fans to kind of hold out and wait before they rush to judge Joe Milton's accuracy or making plays, as Twitter likes to put it, similar to Jarrett Garantano. I don't think it's fair to label him that at all just yet, just because of what he did at Michigan, because of the Jim Harbaugh situation there. So he's got all the talent in the world. He can use his legs. Alex Golesh, the offense coordinator, talked about that last week when he met with the media, that you can win using his legs, but he wasn't asked to use his legs at Michigan. So he's got all the talent in the world. The staff would love for him to pan out, but I don't think it's just crystal clear just yet, because Harrison Bailey has talent. Hendon Hooker has talent. I do think it's more between Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton right now, with Harrison Bailey kind of following up behind them. But I think Tennessee could put all three in a game, and it's going to be an upgrade at the quarterback position from last year. How much of an upgrade, I don't know. And I do think Joe Milton has the most potential in the room, but all three guys can go in and not drowned if they're thrown into a game like you saw at the quarterback position last year at times.
Considering all the boxes he checks physically, what do you see this staff honing in on the most when it comes to working with Milton, working with his skill set during practice?
Yeah, I think it's just all the football IQ stuff. And I don't even know how much of it is just pure X's and O's. And Joey Halzle, he spoke, and I think Alex Golesh echoed these sentiments, or it was Alex Golesh that said it first, and then Halzle echoed the sentiments that he did have some fundamental tweaks that he needed to make. Joe Milton did when he got here, and he's worked really hard this offseason to improve fundamentally, and Joey Halzle's worked really hard with him as well. So there have been fundamental of a quarterback that has need to be fixed, and they've worked really hard on that. But kind of going back to what I said earlier, I think it's more of just making sure that he's in a good headspace from an X's and O's standpoint. I think the system at Michigan was really complex, and I don't think, quite frankly, that Michigan did a good job of just keeping it simple. And it's not that Joe Milton's not smart and can't handle anything. It's just it was too complex, and they didn't do a good job of making sure that he knew what to do, or any quarterback in that system knew what to do. He was also dealing with some torn ligaments in his throwing hand. I think it was his thumb. So getting healthy, that was big. And then a couple of fundamental tweaks. Just that as a passer, as a natural quarterback, has been really an area of emphasis. But on top of that, just making sure that he has a clear-cut understanding of what to do. I think that's kind of been the biggest area of emphasis for Joe Milton.
So, Ben, let's transition a little bit. We're talking specifically about defensive backs tonight. And for me, this is one of the harder positions to predict. Because of the amount of newcomers that you guess are going to play, namely being Brandon Turnage from Alabama and Kamal Haddon coming over from Independence by way of Auburn. But you've also got a lot of experience at this position, especially at safety. Jalen McCullough, Trayvon Flowers, Theo Jackson, being in there, and Alontae Taylor really being the only guy I would put in Sharpie as a starter in that secondary. How do you see this rotation shaking out? And let's start, Ben, with the cornerback position. Who's got the inside track to start week one opposite of Alontae Taylor?
Yeah, I think you're right in saying that Alontae's kind of the only guy that you would Sharpie in at corner, but I don't know that Alontae's going to be the best corner on the team. I really like where Warren Burrell is at. Warren Burrell looks like a man on a mission through a week of fall camp, and he's a guy that started as a freshman, kind of got banged up and had his spot taken because of the injury, and he's had a really good offseason. He looks good physically. He reminds me of Emmanuel Mosley when E-Man was starting to come into his own, and how ironic that Emmanuel Mosley's coach, Willie Martinez, is now Warren Burrell's coach as well. So I think Warren Burrell's looked really good. I like Alante. I think he is an SEC level starter at corner, but I do think he's better against the run than he is in coverage. I would love to see him play safety. Obviously, it's a little too late for a position change for Alante, but I think Alante Taylor and Warren Burrell are going to be Tennessee's two starting corners. And then when you look at the nickel spot, I think you'll see Theo Jackson there. Obviously, you need your nickel to be a guy that can tackle, but can also tackle, get in the box, not afraid to stick his head in the fan. But then you also need that same nickel guy to be able to line up in a slot, play in space, and cover these just freaks at receiver and tight end that the SEC has. So I think Theo Jackson is Tennessee's best combination of a guy that can cover and can also tackle. He's a veteran. So I think Theo Jackson starts at nickel, and then Danico Slaughter's the other one repping there at nickel, a young guy that started the first game of the season last year against South Carolina at nickel. And then for whatever reason, Jeremy Pruitt didn't go back to him, which was confusing because Sean Schamberger was really bad last year and you didn't have anybody else. But just more coaching malpractice, but that's a different conversation. So I think your starting corners, including the nickel, is Theo Jackson, Warren Burrell, and Alante Taylor.
So, Ben, then at safety, I mean, this team might return more competitive depth and quality depth at safety than any other position. When you look up and down this team, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't this the only position where you've got both of your starters, or I don't know, there's only two positions in this group, but you got 100% of your starts returning at the safety position for Tennessee?
Yeah, pretty much. I like Tennessee's wide receiver position better, but statistically speaking, when it comes to starts, you are correct, because obviously Tennessee loses Josh Palmer, and Josh Palmer's already balling out with the Chargers. But I like Velus Jones. Jalen Hyatt has looked great, in my opinion, through the first week of practice. You have Cedric Tillman coming along. But I like that safety tandem for Tennessee. I think it could be one of the better safety tandems in the SEC. Now, they have a lot to prove, and I don't know how much money I would put on that take that I just gave. But I guess what I'm getting at is that they have the potential to be one of the better safety tandems in the SEC. Jalen McCullough, as a sophomore last year, was banged up with a toe-foot injury, and he's already not a guy that's super fast anyways. And then you add on a foot injury, a toe injury, and it just slowed him down even more. So I don't think last year was really representative of the type of player that Jalen McCullough can be. I don't think he's going to be a star at this level, but I think he can be a really solid SEC starting safety. I really do. And then Trayvon Flowers has the potential to go out and pick off 5-6 passes. And last year was kind of the first year that he was able to stay healthy, and struggled at times because of the confusion of the defense with Jeremy Pruitt, and then also just his first year of true playing experience. But he has the potential to go out and, again, pick off 5 to 6 passes. Signed or committed to play baseball with Kentucky before he committed to play football at Tennessee, and arrived at Tennessee looking to play both baseball and football. A former center fielder, was really good. So you can kind of see where he is so good at tracking the ball in the air and getting a beat on the ball. Kind of looks like literally a center fielder back there. And I think he has big time potential to go out and have a big year statistically in terms of passes that he can pick off. So I think Tennessee's in a real good spot at the safety position. And there's not a ton of depth on this football team, but I do think safety has a little bit of depth. Tamarion McDonald is a guy that the last staff liked a ton, and I think he's impressed a bit the new staff as well. I think Tamarion McDonald's going to be a good football player for Tennessee. The one that they're really high on right now is Christian Charles, the former high school quarterback from Gainesville, Georgia. Knows A.J. Johnson, and now he's playing safety for Tennessee from Georgia, rocking the number 14, which obviously comes with a lot of weight. So
it's tough.
But he's a real good kid. The media talked to him yesterday on Tuesday, and he was a joy to talk to. Doesn't seem like a freshman, very articulate, gives thoughtful answers, and he's a guy that the staff is really high on. And I think you'll see him play some this year, absolutely. And I think he'll be a good football player for Tennessee down the road as well.
Yeah, I think that safety rotation, at least at the top, might be one of the areas where this staff feels the best about this football team, top to bottom, not just this defense with some of the experience and talent you get with those two guys and Flowers and McCullough. Back to the corners, though, on the outside, that was one of the biggest priorities of this offseason, bringing in Kamal Haddon from Auburn, who had a strong spring down on the Plains, and then Brandon Turnage, the former four-star, could never quite crack the rotation of obviously a very deep Alabama defensive backfield. Looked like he was headed to Georgia, and then he ends up in Knoxville. How quickly do you see these guys inserted into the fold? How much of a fit has it been between those two in Knoxville? And you talk about Warren Burrell starting opposite Alontae Taylor. I found it interesting you didn't mention either of those two guys in that discussion off Will's question. Is there a reason for that?
Just because Will was asking about the starters, and I don't know that I would pencil them in as starters right away because they got here so late in the summer. That's really all there is to it. I just think there's such big question marks because you don't know what you're going to get from them right away. I think Tennessee is very impressed by them in terms of what they've brought to the weight room and workouts on the indoor facility. But in terms of practice, we just wrapped up the second day of full pads, and tomorrow will be the first scrimmage. So you just don't know. They're just a huge question mark. And kind of like what you said a minute ago, Lucas, about Tennessee staff being high on the secondary or feeling good about that spot. I do think they feel good about that spot, but it's still such a big question mark. Even though I spoke highly about Flowers and McCullough and Christian Charles and Tamarion McDonald, all four of those guys are still huge question marks. They haven't proven anything. They have the potential to go out and be really good football players, but it's still a huge question mark because you haven't seen them do it. And that's kind of where Kamal Haddon, Brandon Turnage are for me. You just haven't seen them do it yet. And they're somewhat new to the program as a whole. So it kind of feels like they're playing catch up here at the beginning of fall camp. And again, the coaching staff liked what Turnage and Haddon brought to workouts prior to fall camp. Now it's about getting a feel for them this first week or two as to what they can do in pads. And we'll see through the first scrimmage tomorrow on Thursday, and then the second scrimmage next Thursday. I think once you get those two scrimmages under their belt, we'll have a better feel for how much of an impact those two will have this fall.
It feels like Alontae Taylor has really emerged as a leader for this team, not just with the defensive backfield, but as a whole. Obviously, he makes the trip down to Hoover with Josh Heupel for SEC Media Days. And he's always played with that edge, right? Always been a really physical corner. But there's been inconsistencies there throughout his time at Tennessee. What do we need to see from Alontae Taylor this season? He's obviously a leader. Players will look to him. He's a guy now going through his second coaching staff. What does Alontae Taylor need to prove this season on the football field for Tennessee?
I think that he can be efficient in coverage. As I talked about earlier, I would love to see him play safety because he will come up and hit you. Just go back and look at that play against South Carolina when he blew up the
lead blocker.
Block. And yeah, that's right. I think it was like a bubble screen. Blew up the lead blocker, the slot guy, and made a vicious tackle. So
he was the lead blocker on that pick six by Henry To'oTo'o as well in that game.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, he who must not be named. But there's no doubt that he's tough, and I love saying stick your head in the fan. I picked up on that from Juwan Mitchell when I spoke to him when he committed to Tennessee, saying that that's what he's going to bring, a guy that can stick his head into the fan and not be afraid to do so, and everybody's going to follow. Alontae Taylor's that same cloth, or cut from the same cloth, and there's no questioning the heart, the passion of Alontae Taylor, a good leader, good against the run, but inconsistent, in my opinion, in man coverage, really in any type of coverage. So I think that's what he needs to prove this year because he definitely has the tools. He's got the length, the athleticism, the height. He can be an elite corner. Still somewhat new to the position. Played quarterback, receiver mainly in high school, and there was talk about him being a receiver at Tennessee coming out of high school, but Jeremy Pruitt wanted him to play DB. So I think that's what Alontae needs to prove, is that he can be consistent and efficient in terms of coverage. And if he does that, I mean, he's a guy that, in my opinion, can be drafted third, fourth round, if not second round.
Ben, last thing for you. We really appreciate the time as always. Lucas and I have talked on this show a couple of different times about Tennessee's got to be really simple, but really aggressive on defense in order to have a chance this season, because they're just not deep enough with how much this offense is going to give them the football quickly at times this season to let teams go on long drives and just be on the field for minutes and minutes and minutes at a time, especially in the SEC. Do you get the sense that this is just going to be a let's blitz, let's go all out to try to force turnovers and see what happens kind of defense? Because to me, that's the only way this defense is really going to be successful with as thin as they are.
Yeah, I agree with y'all's thought process, but I don't know that the staff has reached that mindset just yet. They may have, but that's not the vibe that I pick up on in terms of speaking to them when they speak with the media. It seems like they're still in the evaluation period of trying to figure out the personnel that they have, as I just talked about with Kamal Hadden and Brandon Turnage, because they picked up so many newcomers on the defensive side of the ball over the course of the summer after spring practice. I mean, 2 new guys at each level of the defense. And I mean, 7 of the 8 of those guys are probably going to start, if not play significant snaps. Caleb Tremblay, Dejon Terry, I think they're 2 great candidates to start along the defensive line. They'll definitely play a ton. Juwan Mitchell is going to be the starting middle linebacker. William Mohan, redshirt freshman, kind of feels more of still in the prospect phase. I don't know how much he's going to contribute right now, because you have Byron Young, you have Tyler Barron out on the edge. Roman Harrison's trying to find a groove as well. And then in the secondary, we talked about Kamal Hadden and Brandon Turnage. So it feels to me like they're still trying to evaluate, and maybe they're just, trying to play it off to us media folks, but it kind of feels genuine that they're still evaluating personnel. And I mean, it makes sense. They picked up a lot of guys since spring ball. So I think they're still in that evaluation period, but that should be their thought process even once they settle in on their best personnel, because I do think the starting 11 on defense is going to be better than most people think. It's not going to be great,
right,
but I do think the starters are good quality SEC starters, or at least have a lot of potential, whereas it's the depth behind the starting 11 that you don't have a ton of faith in. So that should be the mindset because of the lack of depth. And I mean, they're an injury at linebacker away from some serious issues. I mean, that if Juwan Mitchell gets hurt, if Jeremy Banks, Aaron Beasley, I mean, if they get hurt, we're talking about a Derek Brodus situation happening at linebacker, not a kicker. I mean, we may have to get Lucas's cat lined up there.
Let's go
at middle linebacker if they go down to injury. So that should
he'll do some damage, Ben. I've got the scars.
I won't play around with your cat. That is good to know for future references. But they're going to have to try to force turnovers and give the offense more opportunities and bend but don't break style of defense, and be as aggressive as possible to try and kind of make up for the lack of depth that they are going to have.
All right, Ben, hopefully you will not be asked to play any linebacker, but if you do, please let us know. We'll have the full highlights on here ASAP as possible, but always appreciate the time, man. Good to catch up with you.
Absolutely. I think out of the 3 of us, I think we need to take a poll as to see who the good people have the most faith in playing linebacker.
I'm going to have to beef up a little bit.
It's between y'all 2.
Well, unfortunately, it may be me because of the gut that I've established over the last year or so. So I've got some beef on me to help take up some space and at least get in the way. I may end up on my back like a cockroach, but I'll at least get in the way of somebody.
Perfect. All right, man. Good to talk to you.
Thank you, Ben.
I appreciate y'all.
All right, Ben McKee, Volquest.com, always giving us good stuff here on the UT podcast. Check him out on Twitter, on Volquest. Always brings it. One of the best there is right there for sure. All right, Lucas, before we let the good people go, Dane Davis throwing a little bit of a haymaker at the Jeremy Pruitt regime versus the Josh Heupel regime. This, to me, is the quote of fall camp so far, maybe Titans or Vols.
Yeah, it's also a guy who didn't really have anything to gain by going at his former head coach. Not like he's a guy who would have had many issues with Jeremy Pruitt that we would know of. This is a guy that was a walk-on offensive lineman who was put on scholarship by Jeremy Pruitt and his staff. And he went from a few OVC offers out of high school to now competing with a 5-star in Darnell Wright for a starting tackle spot, potentially opposite Cade Mays. We still don't know exactly how that's going to shake out. So Dane Davis has had kind of an interesting evolution in his time at Tennessee. So it's interesting to hear him say that about a head coach that kind of gave him his opportunity. And I think that tells you it's honest, right? And in the chat, Colin Gorham says they hated Will Friend, man. Yeah, the Will Friend era as the offensive line coach at Tennessee didn't go so well. Maybe, I don't know if it's against Will Friend or if it's against Jeremy Pruitt. But either way, Dane Davis doesn't have a reason to lie about that. And we've heard about Jeremy Pruitt's practices and his style being referred to as militaristic before by players, not just Dane Davis. So, yeah, it's not unusual. But it's interesting, really interesting. You couldn't get more polar opposite as far as style, culture, in practice, scheme, on the field, during game days when it comes to Jeremy Pruitt and Josh Heupel. So anytime you have that much of a seismic shift in attitude overall across the program, you're going to get quotes like this. I just found it interesting that it came from a guy who was put on scholarship by the previous staff.
It's very interesting. That is for sure. We'll give Colin the last comment here as well, asking when we're on. Colin, that's a great question. We'll tell everyone. We are here Wednesday night, 6 o'clock, right here, right at the end of 3HL. It is the UT podcast on 104.5 The Zone TV. We've had position previews. If you missed any of today's show, you can go find it coming up later tonight on any of the 104.5 The Zone podcast network platforms. That's Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and 1045thezone.com. We'll be back at it again next Wednesday night right here, getting you ready for kickoff between Tennessee and Bowling Green. Lucas, back to the offense. Are we going to go offensive line next week for our position previews?
Might as well. We're talking about Dane Davis. There's some really interesting position battles there, especially on the outside at tackle. And Glenn Alarby just spoke to the media the other day. So, yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about the offensive line.
Enjoy talking with you guys always. Enjoy interacting with you on 104.5 The Zone TV. Lucas, I will see you tomorrow night for High School Football Media Day on 104.5 The Zone. Until then, though, that'll do it for tonight's show. Check the podcast if you missed any of the conversation tonight. We'll be back at it next Wednesday night.